Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today I'll be making this magnifying text effect. You can adjust the range and amount of magnification by controlling an empty. Though there are limitations, this method is quite simple and will only take a few minutes to set up. I might share limitless versions in the future, but for today I think this is a good start. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, as soon as we get into Blender, we'll hop right into Geometry Nodes Layout, H select all, X to delete, Shift A, add mesh plane. Using numpad 7 and 5, go into top orthographic view, click on new to add a new Geometry Nodes map, use this pin to pin the map, and delete the group input. Instead, we'll add a string input in here like so, and type something like test in here, then pass it through a strings to curve and output. Alright, so as soon as we do this, we'll realize instance, then resample to add more points to control. Change this from count to length and change the value to 0.01. Next, we'll fill the curve by using triangle fill, and let's keep it at triangle for this effect. Next, we'll add a empty plane axis, and this will act as a lens object. So wherever this empty is where it's gonna zoom into, and we can also control the range of the effect by using this empty. So in order to magnify, let's use a set position to change its point positions, and also we'll add a point position, and we'll drag this empty into the map and change the type to relative. Next, from position, we'll drag out a vector mass, and we'll subtract object info location from the point position. Next, we'll duplicate the subtract by using Ctrl-Shift-D and change the drop down to distance to get the distance between the location and each point. Next, we'll drag out a scale, vector mass scale from the subtract, and we'll plug this distance into the scale. Then taking the result, we'll plug it into offset of set position. Alright, so now if we were to move the empty, we can see that the text is being, magnified in some kind of way. But it doesn't really look like a lens effect, so let's add a map range and drop it between the distance and scale right here. We'll flip the value of 2min and 2max, so it's going to be 1, 0 instead of 0, 1. And now if I were to move the empty, it looks like it's going through a magnifying glass, right? Right, so let's use this scale of the empty to control the range of magnification. So let's grab the scale from object info and plug it into from max. Now, if I were to change the scale of this empty, you can see the area where it's being magnified changes, right? So the smaller the empty, the smaller the range. If I make it larger, you can see the range changes. Okay. Also, let's make it so we can control the effect externally as well. So in order to make the effect stronger, we can change this to min value, right? So if I were to increase it to min, the effect gets stronger. So what I want to do is pull out this location and use a separate XYZ. And from Z, I'm going to pull out another map range and change the value from min to negative pi, then pi, then negative 2, then 2. And I'm going to plug the result into 2 min, like so. Okay. So now if I were to rotate this empty counterclockwise, I get this convex lens effect. Right. So it magnifies. And if I were to rotate clockwise like so, I get a concave lens effect. Like so. Okay. Right. I'm going to leave it at convex effect, and I'm going to change the scale like so. And pretty much the effect itself is done, right? In order to animate this, all you have to do is animate the location of this lens object. Okay. But there is something I want to show you before I finish up the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is add a set material. Select the default material, and I'm gonna drag out a shader editor. And if you have the empty selected, make sure you're selecting the text. Unpin the map. Select the default material, then go back and pin the map again. Right. So just for explanation, I'm gonna add a checker texture and pass it in like so. And I'm gonna go to the render view and just kind of show you what happens if I were to move the text, the lens around. So this is what happens if you don't really do anything regarding the vector of the texture, right? What happens is that mesh and the texture is out of sync, so it doesn't look like it's magnifying because the texture is kind of not in sync. But if I were to add a texture coordinate, none of these options actually work, because what's happening is it's taking the texture after texture coordinate after where the set position occurs, right? So basically it doesn't look like it's magnifying. So even if I were to choose something like object, you can see the texture is not following the mesh, right? So what has to happen is that you have to store the attribute or store the position before the set position occurs. So I'm gonna use a store named attribute, plug it between fill curve and set position, and change the float to vector. Use something like pause as name, and let's pass through the position into this attribute, right? Now with the shader, what I'm going to do is pull out an attribute and use the same attribute name from here and call it a pause. Pull out a vector and plug it into checker texture, right? Like so. So now if I were to move the empty around, you can see that the texture is actually following the mesh. I'll increase the scale so it's easier to see, but now it looks like it's magnifying even with the texture on it. All right. Great. So I'm gonna go into the node tree and just summarize what we just did, or you can actually check the connections because it's quite small, right? It's pretty simple. All right. Right, I like this effect because it's really small node tree, but it's a pretty useful effect. It's not really, actually magnifying. It's kind of faking it, but it still looks pretty nice. Right. Thank you for watching and see you next time.